Fam, my husband wants a divorce after 15 years, just because I couldn't give him a child. I never thought my marriage would end like this. 15 years ago, when I walked down that aisle, I believed in forever. My husband held my hand so tightly, his eyes filled with promises that no matter what life threw at us, we would face it together. We talked about growing old side by side, filling our home with laughter, and, most of all, the sound of little feet running across the floor. But life had other plans. Year after year, we tried for a baby. Doctor appointments. Endless tests. Medications that made me sick. Nights spent crying quietly into my pillow so he wouldn't hear. And every month, the same crushing disappointment. My husband always said it didn't matter, that I mattered more than any child ever could. I believed him. Until the distance started. At first, it was subtle. He came home later. He stopped reaching for my hand in the middle of the night. Our conversations became short, almost businesslike. I told myself it was just stress. That we were both tired. But deep down, I knew something was breaking. Then, one evening, I walked into the kitchen and found him sitting at the table. There was a stack of papers in front of him. He didn't look up. He didn't smile. He just slid the papers toward me, divorce papers. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice flat, his eyes colder than I'd ever seen. I stared at him, unable to breathe. After 15 years of marriage. This is how it ends. My voice cracked. He didn't answer. In that moment, the weight of every failed pregnancy test, every doctor's appointment, every tear I had shed came crashing down on me. This man, the man who once swore he'd love me no matter what, was ready to walk away simply because I couldn't give him a child. And I wondered. After giving him my youth, my love, my loyalty, what was left of me if he left? When I think back to the first years of our marriage, it feels like a completely different lifetime. We were young, full of dreams, and absolutely certain that our love could conquer anything. My husband was my best friend, my safe place, and my biggest cheerleader. We didn't have much, just a small apartment, second-hand furniture, and two hearts beating wildly for each other. But we had hope, and in those days, hope felt limitless. From the very beginning, we talked about children. I pictured him holding our baby, rocking them to sleep, whispering lullabies in that deep, comforting voice of his. He would smile and tell me how he couldn't wait to be a father. Back then, after 15 years of marriage felt like a distant future we would reach with our home full of love, laughter, and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. In those early days, everything was effortless. We'd wake up on Saturday mornings and make pancakes together, the kitchen filling with the smell of butter and syrup. We'd sit on the couch for hours, planning baby names and daydreaming about whether our firstborn would have his eyes or my smile. Those moments felt so certain, like they were simply waiting to happen. Looking back, I realize now how much I took for granted. We thought starting a family would be as easy as deciding we were ready. We thought love alone would make it happen. The first few months, we didn't even think about timing or cycles, we were just two people in love, ready for the next chapter. When nothing happened, we brushed it off. "It'll happen when it's meant to," he said, pulling me into his arms. And I believed him. We had time, after all. We were still young, still so sure of each other. I didn't know then that those carefree mornings would one day become precious memories I'd cling to, that one day, my husband would look at me not with love and excitement, but with the cold eyes of a man who had decided I was no longer enough. Sometimes I lie awake at night and replay those early years in my mind. The way he laughed when I burned the pancakes. The way he rested his hand on my stomach when we talked about our future children, as if they were already there, waiting for us. I hold on to those memories because they remind me that once, before the pain and disappointment, there was a time when he saw me as his whole world. And maybe that's what hurts the most, knowing that I haven't changed, but his love has. It started so quietly, I almost didn't notice. In the second year of our marriage, I began to sense that something wasn't going according to the plan we had painted so vividly. Month after month, I waited for the little pink line to appear on the test, the one that would signal the beginning of our dream. But it never came. At first, we laughed about it. Maybe the baby is just waiting for us to buy a bigger place, my husband joked. But beneath the humor, I could feel a faint undercurrent of worry beginning to ripple through our lives. I brushed it aside. We were young. We had time. But time passed faster than I expected. By year 3, our friends had started to build their own families. Baby showers became a constant, and each one was a bittersweet reminder of what we didn't have. I'd hold someone else's newborn in my arms, breathing in that sweet baby smell, and my chest would ache with longing. My husband would smile politely, but I could see it, the way his eyes lingered on the child just a little too long. Eventually, the "when we have kids" conversations turned into "if we have kids." That one small change in language pierced my heart like a knife. We decided to seek medical advice, telling ourselves it was just a precaution. But sitting in that doctor's office, hearing terms like low fertility and treatment options, made everything suddenly real. The tests began, for both of us. Blood work, ultrasounds, endless appointments. I tried to stay hopeful, but the sterile smell of the clinic, the cold metal of examination tables, and the sound of doctors explaining statistics drained something from me. I started to feel less like a woman and more like a problem to be solved. My husband tried to be supportive, but I could feel him slipping away, inch by inch. He no longer placed his hand on my stomach in the quiet moments. He stopped talking about names or nursery colors. And when I would cry at night, he'd simply pat my shoulder before turning to face the other side of the bed. I didn't realize it at the time, but those were the first cracks in our foundation, the ones that, years later, would split wide open. Infertility wasn't just stealing our dream of becoming parents. It was slowly, silently stealing us. And I began to wonder, if we couldn't create a child together, could we still create a life worth living together? By the 5th year of our marriage, the question, "when are you two going to have kids?" had become the background noise of my life. It came at family gatherings, over dinners with friends, even in casual conversations at work. People asked with a smile, never realizing how each word felt like a blade. I learned to fake a laugh, to say things like, "Oh, we're just enjoying our time together," while my insides twisted into knots. But outside pressure was nothing compared to the pressure inside our home. My husband stopped making jokes about waiting for the right time. Instead, his words became sharper, more clipped. If a friend announced a pregnancy, his smile would vanish as soon as we were alone. "Why them and not us?" he'd mutter. At first, I thought he was simply hurting like I was. But slowly, I began to see it. He wasn't just angry at the situation. He was angry at me. He never said it outright in those early years, but the resentment hung in the air like a fog. When test results came back showing my chances of conceiving were slim, I saw the disappointment in his eyes. He told me it wasn't my fault, but his voice lacked warmth. It felt like he was reading lines from a script he didn't believe. I started avoiding family events. I couldn't handle the way relatives would glance at my stomach before asking how we were doing. I hated the pity in their eyes, and worse, I hated the shame I felt, as if my worth as a wife had been reduced to my ability to bear children. The strain began to change us. We argued more often. Small disagreements about money or chores would spiral into hurtful words neither of us could take back. I tried to suggest adoption, but he brushed it off, saying he wanted a child of his own blood. That phrase stung more than I expected. Did he mean that without a child connected to him by DNA, our life together wasn't enough? One night, after a particularly painful argument, I overheard him on the phone with his mother. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," he said. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the rest. In that moment, I realized the man who had once sworn to love me through anything was starting to see me as a mistake he wanted to undo. The walls of our marriage were closing in, and no amount of love or shared history seemed strong enough to hold them up. I was losing my husband, and I didn't know how to stop it. By the 7th year of our marriage, my husband and I were no longer the couple who stayed up late laughing in bed or shared whispered dreams about the future. We were two strangers living under the same roof, bound only by a marriage certificate and years of memories that were starting to feel like they belonged to someone else. He came home later and later, often claiming he had extra work or meetings that ran over. I wanted to believe him, but the way he avoided my eyes told a different story. When he was home, his phone seemed to be glued to his hand, and I noticed how quickly he'd turn the screen away when I walked into the room. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. After all, I was already feeling insecure because of the infertility. But then, little things began to pile up. The faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine on his shirt. A sudden interest in going to the gym, buying new clothes, and getting a haircut every other week. The way he smiled at his phone, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. One night, I confronted him. I asked if there was someone else. He didn't yell or deny it immediately. He just stared at me for a long time, his jaw tightening, and finally said, "You're imagining things." But his voice was flat, and that flatness scared me more than any angry outburst could have. Our bedroom became a place of silence. We no longer touched, no longer kissed goodnight. Meals were eaten in front of the TV with the volume turned up high enough to drown out the fact that we had nothing to say to each other anymore. Then came the day I saw her name on his phone, a simple text that read, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My hands shook as I read it. I didn't need proof beyond that. In that moment, every late night, every evasive answer, every cold glance made sense. When I confronted him again, he didn't deny it this time. He just looked at me with a mixture of pity and frustration. "I'm not happy, and I haven't been for a long time," he said. "I need something more. Something you can't give me." Those words shattered me in a way no doctor's diagnosis ever could. This wasn't about children anymore. This was about him deciding I wasn't enough, as a wife, as a partner, as a woman. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the life we built together crumble into the abyss, and he was already walking away without looking back. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that used to mean cozy blankets, hot chocolate, and old movies together. But that day, the sound of rain against the windows only made the house feel colder, emptier. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea I hadn't touched, when he walked in. He didn't sit down. He didn't even take off his coat. He just stood there, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, and said my name in a tone that told me whatever came next would change everything. "I think we need to talk," he began. My chest tightened. I knew. I had known for months, maybe even years, but hearing the words still made my heart slam against my ribs. "I want a divorce." There it was. Simple. Final. No hesitation. His voice didn't crack. His hands didn't shake. It was as if he'd rehearsed the line 100 times before saying it out loud. I asked him why, even though deep down, I already knew. He didn't mention love or marriage or the years we'd shared. He just said, "I want children. You can't give me that. And I can't spend the rest of my life without being a father." The words sliced through me. I reminded him of all the things we'd talked about, adoption, fostering, other ways to build a family, but he shook his head like I was missing the point. "It's not the same," he said. "I want my own blood." Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to cry in front of him. I asked if there was someone else, and after a long pause, he admitted it. "Yes. And she can give me what you can't." That was the moment my knees almost gave out. Not because of her, but because of how easily he said it, like I was an obstacle he could simply step around to get to the life he wanted. I thought of every sacrifice I'd made for him over the years, the nights I stayed up caring for him when he was sick, the dreams I put on hold so we could save for our future, the love I gave him freely even when my own heart was heavy. And now, none of it mattered. He walked away from the table, from me, from our marriage, with the same calm detachment as someone leaving a job they'd outgrown. I sat there long after he was gone, listening to the rain, realizing that the man I once believed would love me forever had just chosen a life without me, and without a trace of regret. The days after he asked for a divorce blurred together into one long, endless night. I didn't eat. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed his words, "She can give me what you can't." It was more than a rejection. It was a condemnation of my worth as a woman. Suddenly, I wasn't just losing my husband, I was losing the life I had built around the belief that we were a team. Friends started calling, but I ignored most of them. I couldn't bear the pity in their voices, or worse, the curiosity. When I finally answered one call from my oldest friend, her first words were, "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." That confirmed it, he had already told people. Soon, the whispers began. At the grocery store, I noticed how two women from our neighborhood quickly turned their heads away after looking at me. At church, the pastor's wife patted my hand and said, "God has a plan for you," in the kind of tone people use when they don't know what else to say. I smiled politely, but inside, I felt like screaming. Social media was worse. I had stopped posting months earlier, but now, every time I accidentally stumbled on his profile, I saw new pictures, him smiling at dinner with her. Her hand in his. A photo of them hiking in the same place he and I had gone for our first anniversary. Each image was a knife twisting deeper. My mother called every day, urging me to come home and stay with her for a while. But I couldn't. Going home felt like admitting defeat, like confirming to everyone that my marriage had truly collapsed. Instead, I stayed in our, soon to be my, house, surrounded by the ghost of our life together. His empty closet. The unused coffee mug he always favored. The dent in the couch cushion where he used to sit. Nights were the worst. The silence was so heavy, I would leave the TV on just for background noise. I kept expecting his car in the driveway, the sound of his keys in the lock. But he didn't come back. He never would. And then came the paperwork, the cold, impersonal legal documents that reduced 15 years of love, laughter, and struggle into lines on a page. My signature felt like the final nail in the coffin, not just of our marriage, but of the woman I used to be. It was in those weeks that I realized something. Grief over a divorce is not just about losing a person. It's about losing the version of yourself that only existed with them. And I had no idea who I was without him. At first, I thought healing meant getting over him. I told myself that one day I would wake up and not think about the divorce, not feel the weight of his betrayal, not wonder why I wasn't enough. But days turned into weeks, and the ache remained, just softer, less sharp, like a wound that had scabbed but hadn't fully healed. It started with small steps. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, partly to make it feel less like our space and more like my space. I took down the wedding photos, replaced them with prints I'd always loved but never hung because he said they didn't match the decor. I bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table every week, something he always called a waste of money, because seeing them there reminded me that beauty didn't need anyone's permission. One afternoon, I found myself walking into a bookstore I hadn't visited in years. I wandered through the aisles without purpose until my hands landed on a dusty old journal. That night, I began writing, not just about him, but about me. My childhood dreams. The things I'd given up. The places I wanted to go. It was strange and liberating to realize that my story didn't end with his goodbye. I also began saying yes to invitations I would have once declined. Dinner with coworkers. A weekend trip with my cousin. Volunteering at a local animal shelter. Each new experience felt like peeling back a layer of grief, revealing parts of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. The most unexpected moment came when I ran into an old college friend at a cafe. We talked for hours, laughing until my cheeks hurt. When I got home that night, I realized I hadn't thought about my ex even once during that conversation. It wasn't about romance, it was about proof that joy could still find me, even in the rubble. I won't lie, there are still nights when I miss the idea of him, the safety of knowing there was someone waiting at home. But I've learned that safety built on someone else's promises can vanish in a single sentence. Real safety is knowing I can stand on my own. And so, little by little, I began to rebuild, not the marriage, not the life we had, but myself. I wasn't the same woman who had walked down the aisle 15 years ago, nor the broken one who watched him walk away. I was someone new. Someone stronger. If you had told me a year ago that I would be living alone, divorced, and starting over at this stage of my life, I would have laughed, or cried. Maybe both. I thought marriage was forever. I thought love was enough. I thought he was enough. But divorce has a strange way of showing you truths you never wanted to see. It forces you to face the rawest parts of yourself, the fears, the insecurities, the pieces you gave away without even realizing it. For a long time, I believed I was broken because I couldn't give him a child. Now I understand, my worth was never tied to my ability to be a mother, a wife, or anyone else's definition of enough. Healing wasn't a single moment of epiphany. It was a slow, often painful process of rediscovering who I am without him. It was finding joy in small rituals, learning to enjoy my own company, and realizing that I am allowed to create a life that is entirely mine. To anyone listening who is going through a divorce, who feels like the world you knew has been ripped away, I want you to know something. You will not be the same person when you come out the other side. But that's not a tragedy. That's a rebirth. I won't pretend the scars disappear. Some wounds never fully close. But they stop defining you. You start to define yourself. And when you do, you'll realize the ending you feared so much was actually the beginning of a life you never thought you could have. I once thought love was enough, but I now know love alone is never enough, self-love is. Because love can fail. Promises can break. But you, your strength, your voice, your story, will always remain. Sometimes, the ending you fear the most is the beginning your soul has been waiting for. If my story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you believe healing after divorce is possible. Subscribe to At True Moments Life for more real-life stories of love, loss, and self-discovery.